The term it girl originated in the 1920s and has been used to define many actresses over the years. From Clara Bow to Marilyn Monroe to Sharon Stone to Megan Fox, these women have been popularized for their sex symbol status and mass appeal to all audiences. Every generation has its own it girl, and it seems that Gen Z has crowned Anyone But You and Euphoria actress Sydney Sweeney as theirs. Sweeney is a fantastic actress, but that is largely ignored in favor of objectifying Sydney's body. Sweeney often taps into her sex appeal in order to earn cultural recognition, like with her recent stunt of selling soap made from her own bathwater, which there is no shame in doing, but I think that Sydney is so incredibly talented that it would be a shame if people didn't start seeing her as more than a Hollywood it girl. Today, I will be going over Sydney's career and unpacking her journey to fame and the next steps she should take to fully tap into her potential. Sydney Sweeney grew up in Spokane, Washington, a small town on the border of Idaho and Washington in a religious family. Sweeney was a dog-loving, active teen who engaged in a variety of sports, including soccer and wakeboarding. She balanced this with a flourishing academic life as a member of both the robotics and mathematics teams at school, and eventually becoming valedictorian of her high school. Sydney could have had a bright future ahead of her as an academic, but she went down a different path, acting. For a while, she attempted to balance both, studying college online whilst filming The Handmaid's Tale, but angry at the lack of commitment, her professor refused to let her take her finals, and so Sydney chose to commit to acting. When did this passion start? Sydney's first exposure to acting was when auditioning for an extra role in a local film. From there, she presented her parents with a 5-year business plan, which convinced them to let her follow her dreams. For many years, Sydney auditioned, moving around from Seattle to Portland before finally residing in Los Angeles. She managed to book TV guest star roles in shows like Heroes, Criminal Minds, 90210, Grey's Anatomy, and Pretty Little Liars, as well as some small horror movie roles. During her era of auditions, Sydney auditioned for a film called Immaculate, a unique horror movie revolving around a young woman in a boarding school who mysteriously gets impregnated. The movie was stuck in development hell, but always stayed in the back of Sydney's mind. After years of auditioning, Sydney finally got her breakout role in Netflix's short-lived comedy Everything Sucks. In her first ever series regular role, Sydney portrayed Emmeline, a fierce drama student in an extremely toxic relationship. Emmeline is kind of a bitch, but also super lovable. Her best moments are when paired with her true romantic interest, Kate, played by Peyton Kennedy. Emmeline and Kate have such great chemistry and a cute dynamic, but the age gap controversy ruined the progressiveness. Sadly, Everything Sucks was cancelled after 1 season, but the project did introduce Sydney to director Michael Mohan, who she would later on hire to direct Immaculate. Sydney's follow-up role as Eden in The Handmaid's Tale is one of my personal favourites in her filmography. Eden is a pious teenager married off to Nick Blaine. Having been raised in the dystopia that is Gilead, Eden is very oblivious to what is normal and immediately jumps to the conclusion that Nick is gay for not wanting to sleep with her when she's a literal child. Eden falls in love with a guard named Isaac and attempts to run away with him, which is pretty standard teenage behavior, but for this she's put on trial and drowned in a pool for wanting to be with who she loved. Eden was no sinner, she was just a young girl attempting to understand Christianity in a world where it was twisted. Her death is a major turning point in all of the characters' arcs. Sydney sold every aspect of Eden, from her annoying pluckiness to her somber loneliness to her heart-wrenching execution that makes me cry every single time I watch it. Sydney's work here proved her acting chops, and this was also a fundamental step in her producing journey, as she admired Elizabeth Moss's prowess and leadership. Sweeney was slowly gaining momentum in the industry, but she only became a household name after the release of HBO's smash hit Euphoria. The first season was an absolute phenomenon, catapulting its young cast into instant stardom. Sydney portrayed the character of Cassie Howard, an extremely insecure and over-sexualized teenage girl whose daddy issues caused her to seek validation from the men around her. Cassie goes through a lot in the first season, following the release of her private videos. She faces judgment from her boyfriend McKay, which causes her to act out, cheating on him, which becomes an issue once Cassie becomes pregnant with McKay's baby. He pressures her into an abortion, and Cassie goes through with it in a very emotional scene that Sweeney portrays perfectly with nuance and emotion. To play such a morally complex character at such a young age is very tricky, and Sydney did it perfectly in the first season. Although the incessant nude scenes made her character less known for her personality and more for her body, which could be a commentary on the sexualization of young women in vulnerable spaces, but considering it comes from Sam Levinson, I doubt it. Sydney's first major film role was in Quentin Tarantino's ninth film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as a Manson girl. Whilst a pretty small role, the opportunity to audition and work with Quentin was very important to building her respect in Tinseltown, and also drove her first scandal, a rumoured Brad Pitt romance, which died down after it was revealed she got engaged to Jonathan Davino. It was at this time that Sydney began to delve into producing, forming her production company 50/50 Films on July 31st, 2020. She then went on to star in the Prime Video horror movie Nocturne, which is actually in my top 4 favourites on Letterboxd, which, by the way, you should check out my page, link in the description, but anyways, this is an excellent film. Sweeney plays Juliet, a music student in her senior year who has always lived in the shadow of her twin sister Vivian. The Whiplash-esque thriller sees Juliet spiral into darkness and depression as her future at Juilliard slips away. She discovers a dark book linked to a fellow music student who took her own life. Juliet steps into her shoes and begins to outshine her sister, but in the end, it takes a very dark turn. Nocturne is an amazing commentary on academic pressure, jealousy, and depression, and Sydney shines in the role of Juliet. In a dramatic switch-up from Nocturne, Sydney then went on to star in the first season of HBO's anthology series The White Lotus, in the role of Olivia Mossbacher, a naive rich girl on vacation with her family and best friend Paula. Olivia is the classic rebellious young woman who wants nothing to do with her family. She likes to think of herself as so much more socially aware than the rest of the high-class Mossbachers, but Mike White's excellent writing shows how deeply flawed she is. Olivia pretends to be sophisticated as she reads Nietzsche, but side-eyes others from behind the front cover. Her friendship with Paula is strange, as Olivia clearly cares about her, but also is so possessive it feels like she wants to own Paula, which can either be interpreted in a sapphic or narcissistic way. Sydney perfectly portrays the humour and emotion of this annoyingly nuanced character. I would love to see her return in a potential all-star season of The White Lotus. After starring in the Prime Video film The Voyeurs, Sydney went from star to icon with the release of Euphoria's second season, which captured the cultural zeitgeist in an unprecedented way, and Sweeney's character Cassie was at the centre of the craziest storyline. Following her abortion and breakup with McKay at the end of season 1, a depressed and lonely Cassie easily falls into the arms of Nate Jacobs, her best friend Maddie's abusive ex, who she forms a secret relationship with. An already insecure girl, Nate's horrible personality turns Cassie into a monster, waking up at 4 a.m. every morning to try and please him. While some criticize how unlikable Sam Levinson made Cassie this season, Cassie's zaniness turned her into an instant meme.
Nate, is I am crazier.
That's not something to be fucking proud of, Cassie.
No, but it is something you should be scared.
What the fuck?
Cassie spirals, breaking down and getting drunk at Maddie's party. The secondhand embarrassment you feel for Cassie is crazy, especially after her betrayal is revealed to Maddie.
You dumb fucking bitch! I'm gonna fuck you! Run away from me, you stupid!
When lying to cover it up doesn't work, Cassie decides to tap into the villain everyone sees her as, becoming Nate's public girlfriend and ruining her sister Lexi's play.
Well, if that makes me a villain, then so fucking be it. I can play the fucking villain.
Which honestly was valid since she's just publicly aired out all of her trauma without consent. Anyways, after an ass whooping from Maddie, Cassie realizes that her insecurities have led her to become trapped in an abusive cycle with Nate, one that she can't get out of. For her role as Cassie in Euphoria Season 2 and Olivia in White Lotus Season 1, Sydney received Emmy nominations, which gave her more credibility as an actress. Sydney didn't immediately jump into crazy new projects following her rise in popularity thanks to Euphoria Season 2, instead electing to play the lead role in the HBO film Reality. This was Sweeney's first time playing a real person, that being of American Whistleblower Reality winner. The film was a complete documentation of her arrest, and Sydney completely sells the nuanced emotions of Reality, acting realistic to the situation. This, along with Handmaid's Tale and Immaculate, are some of the best examples of the talent Sydney has. Sweeney had already garnered fame on the small screen, but the film that made her a movie star was 2023's Anyone But You. She co-starred in the romantic comedy with Glenn Powell, straight off the success of Top Gun Maverick, and it was genuinely a really big hit. It grossed over $200 million, bringing back the theatrical rom-com. Not only was it financially successful, but the film is just a blast. It is funny, raunchy, and as an Australian, very relatable. Sydney and Glenn have such incredible chemistry that they really amped up in the press tour. Their affair rumors largely charged the film's buzz. This was Sydney's first project that she produced. In 2024, Sydney co-starred in the critically panned Madam Web. Sweeney plays Julia Carpenter, aka Spider-Woman, but there is less than 2 minutes of her in a pretty sick costume. For most of the film, Julia is just a nerdy and innocent teenage girl, which doesn't really fit with Sydney's vibe. They put her in a fuck-ass ginger wig and glasses and thought she could look like a loser. Anyway, she had some good moments with the other Spider-Girls, but otherwise her performance was lacking, largely due to a horrendous script. The only good thing to come out of Madam Web was the fact that it helped her build a relationship with Sony, which in turn got Anyone But You made. Her most recent project was a culmination of her whole career, from when she first auditioned for Immaculate 10 years earlier, to Everything Sucks, where she first met Michael Mohan, to The Voyeurs, where her and Michael furthered their creative bond, to finally 2024's Immaculate, which Sydney's company 50/50 Films produced. Sweeney plays a devoted nun working in an Italian convent who gets pregnant despite never having sex. The people around her believe that this immaculate conception is a gift from God, and her baby will be Jesus reincarnated. However, it turns out that the convent has had sinister intentions all along, manipulating events and implanting Sydney's character with blood from the cross Jesus died on. In an incredibly thrilling scene, she escapes the convent, getting covered in blood as she goes. The ending is absolutely insane, like Sydney literally should have got an Oscar nomination for that scene alone. Immaculate is a fantastic elevated horror film with great commentary on religion and fanaticism. So, what projects does Sydney have lined up? Well, she is starring alongside Julianne Moore in the drama film Echo Valley, releasing very soon on Apple TV. In August, she has 2 films coming out. One of them is Eden, directed by Ron Howard, where she stars as a real woman living on an island, alongside an incredible all-star cast, including Jude Law, Vanessa Kirby, Ana de Armas, and Daniel Bruhl. The other is Americana, a Southern comedy co-starring Eric Dane, Paul Walter Hauser, and Halsey. At some point this year, a biopic about iconic female fighter Christy Martin will come out, with Sydney in the title role having to go through a large physical transformation for the part. Then, on December 25th this year, we have The Housemaid, co-starring Amanda Seyfried and Brandon Scanlon, which is one of my all-time favorite books, so I'm so thrilled that she's going to be starring in it. Early next year, after a long wait, Cassie is finally back with the release of Euphoria Season 3, which is currently filming. From the looks of it, it looks like Cassie and Nate are tying the knot, which is crazy. She's also producing and starring in a heap more projects like adaptations of the Reddit short story I Pretended to Be a Missing Girl, and the video game Split Fiction, directed by Wicked's John M. Chu. Other projects include Scandalous, co-starring David Johnson and being directed by Coleman Domingo, as well as an A24 adaptation of The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. There's also the adaptation of They Wish They Were Us for HBO, starring Sweeney and Halsey, which was announced in 2020 as 50/50 Films' first producing effort, and there's been largely no updates since, but apparently it's still happening. So, now we've gone through Sydney's past and future. What is she doing now? Well, as for her personal life, she recently broke off her engagement from Jonathan Davino after almost 6 years, and now is single, with some speculating that her and Glenn Powell will finally get together. Sydney has formed great relationships with brands such as Ford and Laneige. You literally can't go into a Sephora without seeing her face. Recently, she has teamed up with the men's soap company Dr. Squatch, first for a very sexual commercial, and now for a soap made from her bath water. Clearly, Sydney has no problem being sexualized, but here's the thing. Nobody cared about her Oscar-worthy performance in Immaculate because of Glenn Powell. Her fans are more focused on the bathwater soap than the fact she has a movie coming out in a week. She has such talent that I don't want to go to waste. I'd like for Sydney to find a healthy balance, to follow the career paths of women like Emma Stone, Scarlett Johansson, and Margot Robbie, rather than Megan Fox. Sydney Sweeney is more than an it girl.